all building bridges towards God. That we could draw closer to God and that God's kingdom could draw closer to us. And in the building of these bridges, the choices that we make go a long way in determining what kind of bridge we have. It's a story about a person coming out of the bank, and they've just made a big withdrawal. And as they're going down the sidewalk, a person comes up behind them and pushes a gun into their back and says, "Your money or your life?" The person's frozen. So the robber pushes harder and says, "Your money or your life?" Still nothing. Finally, insistently, the robber pushes the gun and says, "Your money or your life?" And the person says, "Give me a second, I'm thinking." I know what you're thinking, that this is the Sermon on the Mount. And that's true. It is stewardship season. But I want to tell you something. I almost didn't want to give this sermon, because who wants to give a sermon about asking people to give more? That's uncomfortable. The reason I'm speaking to you today is not simply because the church needs resources. It's because I believe firmly and deeply and have an experience in my life of knowing that the kind of generosity we have affects our spiritual lives. It makes a difference. The way that we give comes out of our sense of wisdom, and it magnifies our wisdom. Our generosity comes out of our holiness that we have, and it magnifies our holiness. How we choose to give comes out of our relationship from God and magnifies our relationship with God. And for that reason, it matters most of all. Because how you give, not only with money, but with time and energy and love, determines the character of our heart, and it changes our spirit. It comes out of wisdom, and it magnifies our wisdom. I was talking with a doctor once about prayers, a Christian doctor, a deeply faithful man. And he said that when you pray, you must always try to close your eyes. And I said, why do we need to close our eyes when we pray? There's so many beautiful things in the world. And he said, here's the thing that you need to know about the brain. He said, seeing is so important in our evolution. Seeing is so important in our safety that when our eyes are open, everything in our brain aligns to deal with the visual information that's coming in, and all of it gets dominated by what we see. He said, but when you close your eyes, really you're setting your mind free. You're setting your heart free from the things that can be seen, so that we can concentrate not on the things that can be seen, but the things that can't be seen. As St. Paul says, the things that can be seen are temporary, but the things that cannot be seen are eternal. This is the wisdom that I'm talking about helping ourselves to shift from being dominated by the things we see, the things we want, the things we have, to beginning to live lives that are dominated by the things that can't be seen, by the things that are spiritual, by the things that are eternal. Years ago, I was in Ireland, and I had the chance to walk and to travel through this beautiful country. And I can remember going to ancient abbeys and castles that stood, get this, for 1,000 years. Imagine. An abbey that stood for 1,000 years as a center of Christian fellowship and worship and community, rich and vibrant, and today it is ruins. Today it is ruins. There is nothing that can be built that will not eventually fall. There's nothing that can be created that won't eventually be destroyed. There's nothing that you can see that won't eventually, someday, become dust. And this is why living lives dominated by things we have and things we see is not wise. Because we're setting our lives, we're setting our attention, we're setting our resources, we're setting our choices on things that are temporary, or things that are falling away. This is why Jesus says to us, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but set up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where moth and rust do not consume and thieves cannot break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Our goal, our purpose in our spiritual life is to learn to store up treasures for heaven, to learn to have treasures that are heavenly, and to set our heart on those things. Imagine that you go to a financial advisor, and the financial advisor says, well, we've got two investments you can choose, and you make a choice here. One of them is guaranteed to fail, ultimately, and the other is guaranteed, ultimately, to be eternal. Now, where should we invest ourselves? Where should we invest our money? It makes it all very clear, doesn't it? The question is, are we investing in things that are falling away? How much are we investing in things that are guaranteed to fail, and how much are we investing in things that are guaranteed to succeed and be eternal? There's a story about a woman going through heaven. She's just arrived at the pearly gates, and St. Peter is taking her down the golden walkway. And as she's walking, St. Peter says he's bringing her to her new home. And she's walking, and she sees these beautiful mansions, palatial, gorgeous things. And she gets to the end of the street, and she looks, and St. Peter gestures, and it's a tiny little rundown shack. And she says, wait a minute, Peter. St. Peter? Sir, I've seen many beautiful homes as we walk down the street. How come I've got a shack? And St. Peter looks at her apologetically and he says, I'm so sorry. We did the best we had with what you gave us. Think about that for a second. We did the best we had with what you gave us. The wisdom is to recognize that there are two levels to life. We need this money, right? We need things for our bodies. We need things for our people. We need spaces to be in. Nobody's saying take 100% and give nothing to our physical needs. But the question is, how much are we building up the spiritual things, the spiritual treasures? How much are we giving there that will make any difference for eternity? Those are the choices, the generosity choices that come out of our wisdom. And they also, as we make that choice to grow heavenly treasure, magnify our wisdom. These choices also come out of our holiness, secondly, and they magnify our holiness. You see, how we choose to give can build up in us new behaviors, new ways of being. When we take 100% of what we have and we use all of it to serve our own needs, what we're doing there is we're fostering control, we're fostering independence, and we're saying everything that happens to me depends entirely on me, and I am self-reliant, and I'm going to make everything work all by myself. Now, that probably isn't true anyhow, but it's the spirit that choice comes from. I need to take care of myself. I need to make sure that there's enough. I need to make sure that I need to make sure that everything is okay. It comes out of a sense of lack of trust. It comes out of a sense of out of balance sense of authority and power. When we choose to give, let's say 10%, what we're doing is we're creating a gap in our lives. We're saying, I have this 100% of things that are coming in, 100% of what I have and who I am, and I'm going to give 10% of that away, which means there's now a hole, and I'm going to need help there. I'm going to need God to come down into that space and take me that last 10%. I'm going to need my relationships with other people to come and fill that space and help me to get that last 10%. When we do that, it fosters in us, it teaches us to have a sense of trust. It teaches us to grow our sense of faith. It teaches us to grow our interdependence. It teaches us to grow our awareness of God and our calling of God into our lives. It's not just about money, and I want to be very, very clear about that. Some of us have more, and some of us have less. What we're talking about is a way of being. It's a way of living. It's a way of taking all that we have and then being in a relationship with God that in which we give part of that away and ask also something in return from the Lord. But imagine what if you took 10% of everything that you are, all that you have. What if you took 10% of your love and you gave it away in ways that made God's heart happy? What if you took 10% of your attention and put your attention, just 10% of what you have, on things that matter eternally and make a difference to others in ways that are powerful and compassionate? What if you took 10% of your time and spent that time just giving it to God and things that made God happy? Let's make it clear for a second. 10% of your time. It's 24 hours in a day. We move the decimal over 1. That's 2.4 hours. Imagine the change in yourself if every day you gave 2.4 hours to do things that matter most to the Lord. How would that change who you are? How you live? How would that change your faith? How would that change your sense of holiness? 2.4 hours a day, part of it is spent in prayer. And part of it is spent in reading Scripture. And part of it is spent on reaching out to people you haven't talked to in a while to strengthen and rebuild those relationships. 2.4 hours a day, every single day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Who would you become? This is what I'm talking about. You see, the generosity of giving, it comes out of our holiness. The choice to do it comes out of our holiness. But as we do it, it magnifies our holiness. It makes us better. It makes us happier. It makes us more grounded and peaceful and true. Jesus says, I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. What does that mean? It means what God asks us to do is for our sake. God wants us to do these things because it will make us happier. God is commanding us to do these things because He knows the difference it will make in our lives will be a positive difference, will make our lives better, make our faith stronger, make our relationships more true. We're asked to do these things because it changes us for the better. And so our generosity, it comes out of our holiness and it magnifies our holiness. Thirdly and lastly, it also comes out of our relationship with God and it magnifies our relationship with God. Years ago, Libby told me about a video that she saw at a church once. She was, when we were dating years ago, she was going to South Point, across from the hospital. And I was here, and then we would get together for lunch, and I'd talk about my sermon and message in the morning, and she would talk about the sermon and message she heard in her morning. And she told me once they were doing a stewardship drive. She said they showed a video. Can you imagine? Now let's show the video. I'll tell you the video. You'll see it in your brain. She said there's a video of a table with lots of people around the table. And here walks a person with a beautiful, delicious pie. And they set the pie down, and the first person who takes it, each person has a sign around their neck. It says mortgage. And the person reaches in and takes 2 big pieces of pie and just starts deliciously consuming it. And the pie goes down, and the next person is car payment, and they take a big piece of pie, and they start eating it. And the next one is streaming services, and they take a piece of pie. And the next one is paying credit card bills, and they take a big piece of the pie. And the next one is entertainment, and they take a big piece of the pie. And this pie is getting passed around. And at the end of the table, who is sitting there but Jesus? And by the time the pan gets around to Jesus, she said, Jesus looked down, and there was no pieces left. Just some crumbs. And here's Jesus, and he holds up the pan, and he's shaking out a few crumbs, the last little bit. And he's looking around, and everyone else is just eating deliciously. And Libby said, my wife, she said, the look on his face. She said, I just decided right then, I'm going to give Jesus his pie first. And we talked about it. we actually made an agreement that day. We said, you know what? We're going to live our lives in such a way that Jesus gets his pie first. We're going to find a way to get to 10% of giving to God, and we're going to take that and we're going to give it to Christ, and then the pie pan can pass around, and if things need to be adjusted, then we can adjust them there. Now, I want to be honest with you, it wasn't something we could do immediately because we weren't at 10, and then, we got married, and then there was kids and things. We had to work it out. It took us 5 or 6 years to grow and to plan and to organize so that we could grow and build up to giving 10% to Jesus first. And we've been there now for about 10 years. We give most of it to St. James, but we give some of it to other causes that we know make God's heart happy. That's okay. It's all going to God. But there is really something that happens when you get to the place where you're able to finally give to God what you'd always been hoping, what you'd always been planning. To get there, to have a new sense of sort of peace, to have arrived there, and to have your life finally in the balance that you are seeking. This gets to the point of why do we give 10%? Who made up that number? Well, it turns out it was God. And here's how it happened. It happens very early in the life of the Israelites with Moses. The people are in slavery in Egypt, and God does all this work, this incredible work to take care of the people, right? God sends Moses. Moses has to do all this work with Pharaoh. There's plagues and everything, lots of energy expended. Finally, the people are allowed to be free. God brings them out of slavery, takes them through the Red Sea, takes them up to Mount Sinai, where he claims them as their God, and Moses goes up the mountain to get the law that they're going to need to take care of them for the next thousands of years. And while he's up there, the people are like, geez, it's been a little time. Maybe we should take all of our gold and melt it together and make a cow. And then we could dance and worship the cow. Who's in? And the next thing you know, they're worshiping the golden calf. Moses comes down, and Moses is furious. God is furious. And just a little while after that, God gives them this command. He says, listen, I am your God. I am your king. I am the one in charge of you. You are my vassals. I am your Lord. And from now on, I command you, I call on you to take 10% of everything that comes in and to give it to me. 10%, the first 10% of the olives, the first 10% of the fruit of all the trees, the first 10% of the oil, the first 10% of the grain offering, the first 10% of the flour offering. All of that I want you to give to me to remind you that you are mine, that I am in charge of you, that you are my people, and that I rule over you, and you take your 10% to give it to me in honor and respect for who I am to you. And as you are giving 10% to me, God says, I also reaffirm my commitment to you, that I will watch out for you, and I will take care of you, and as you choose to be my people, I will choose to be your God and to take care of you as your God. I can tell you, when we got to 10%, there was a new relationship that I felt formed with God. A sense of like, look, we are honoring you, and we are grateful to you, and we are in covenant with you, and we are in balance with you. And this sort of sense of peace that comes over the heart. I'll give you a little hint. It's not a good idea to look at the number. It's kind of like taxes. Don't look at the number. You don't have to pay more than you're asked, but we're in a relationship with each other in the United States of America. We're in a relationship with the government. We're in a relationship with a constitution, and we've all decided and agreed this is who we are, this is what we do, and so you just do it, right? You just do it. You give the taxes, you set some stuff aside. When the number comes, you close your eyes, but you just give it away in trust because you know this is who we are and this is what we do. If I stop and look at the number, it's very easy to say, oh, you know what I could do with this. I don't look at the number. I'll tell you why, because I give it to God first. I give it to God right off the top, and my number is what's left. These are the three things that I really I want to send to you for your sake, that we hear for our sake. That our generosity, it comes out of our wisdom, and it magnifies our wisdom. It comes out of our holiness, and it magnifies our holiness. It comes out of our relationship with God, and it magnifies our relationship with God. I hope this year you will fill out a pledge card. You'll find one in your bulletin. We're going to send them out later this week as well. Our goal is 100% participation. So listen, if you can't give anything, write down, I'm going to do my best. And that's fine. If you can only give what you gave last year, then write down the same number, but turn it in. But I do ask that you would pray about this. That when the time comes and you send it in, it wouldn't be a reflex number, it wouldn't just be what you've always done, but that you really stop and think about it, that you're intentional about it, that it's a number that you choose that feels like the right place for you right now, in this time and in this place. I'll just end with one last story, an uncommon story that I've rarely heard. Do you know how they built a bridge across Niagara Falls? They wanted about 100 years ago to build a bridge over the falls so they could get from one side to the other. But it was so large that it was impossible in every normal way to build this bridge. The water was too churning, the space was too big. So do you know what they did? They started with a kite. They got a kite and a fragile little kite string, and they sort of let the kite string go, and they got upwind, and then they blew across the falls, and then when the wind started to sort of die down and the kite fell, somebody grabbed it, and they started with a tiny little string. And you know what they did with that string? They tied to it a slightly bigger string and pulled it across. And then they tied to it a large string, and they pulled that across. And then they tied to it a really big rope, and they pulled that across. And when they had that, they tied a tiny little cable and pulled the cable across. And then a larger cable, and then a nice beefy cable. And once they had a beefy cable across, they were able to send a second beefy cable across, and those two cables became the foundation point for a bridge today that carries 1,000-ton freight trains. And it all began with a kite string. Because we're all building a bridge towards God. We all want to get closer to God, and we want God's kingdom to become closer to us. And the choices that we make with who we are and what we have go a long way in determining what kind of bridge we have. Amen.